I'd like to welcome you all back for the second day of our conference. Yesterday, we had a very exciting and full schedule. We talked about habitat design, we talked about construction techniques, how we're going to build them. We talked about extraterrestrial resources, what we were going to build them out of. Today, we're going to talk about how we get there with space transportation. We're going to have Henry Vanderbilt from Space Access Society leading a panel for us. But before that, we're going to have a little introductory remarks by Justin Karl. Justin works at Kennedy Space Center in Florida, but he is not here representing NASA today. And I'm sure that he would like very much for everyone in the audience to know that. And on that note, take it away, Justin.
Hey, thanks, Edward. Yeah, so of course the standard disclaimer. I think I heard some people give it yesterday. These are my opinions, and certainly NASA doesn't spend any extra money to send people places. So, so that being said, what I really want to do is sort of I want to give you some of my observations. So. My background is that, I finished up my doctoral program like end of about 2012, something like that. I had been working in and out of industry, both energy and space, and doing a little bit of contract work, some research stuff. And for a while, I kept one foot in academia and then one foot in the industry. So. Since then, I went into a little bit of contract work at Kennedy Space Center, and then that evolved into a government position. So I currently work for NASA in NASA Engineering Directorate, and specifically I'm assigned to the Commercial Crew Program. So when we start talking about space access, this is sort of NASA's near-term solution to getting American astronauts on American vehicles back to LEO, resupplying the station, swapping crews, that kind of thing. And the reason I want to report my observations is I got to NASA and I didn't see what I expected, okay? And I saw very many strange things. So as an academician, I worked with NASA previously, a couple of different divisions, worked with safety and mission assurance, did little research projects and stuff. And when you're an academic, people sort of allow you access to places that you really shouldn't. They show you processes that they really shouldn't, but what's the harm? This guy's a professor. And so I was able to, sort of take a look under the hood at a lot of things. And it wasn't optimal, but it was weird because it felt like something was changing. So once I got there and I integrated with NASA proper, the reason I was amazed is that the observations I started making were all positive. Now, that's not to say that there aren't issues, of course, like everybody talks about government bloat and bureaucracy and red tape and all that stuff, and NASA wanting to overmanage things. But they're evolving, and it really struck me as sort of the right time to get involved. So for the Commercial Crew Program, I work in a system called fracture control. I'm a subsystem manager for a commercial crew spacecraft. So fracture control is weird. It sounds like it's like an M&P discipline or it's fracture mechanics based, but it's really not. They use it as a final filter in the certification process. So when they say fracture control, they really mean make sure nothing breaks. So that's kind of like it's a big job. That means I have to do aerodynamics, I have to do thermo, I have to do propulsion structures, everything in between, except for software. I can't really physically break software. So again, I get this opportunity where I get to see all these different sub-disciplines and how they operate, and then I get to work with two providers. I know you guys know that Boeing is developing the Starliner and SpaceX Dragon 2, who are really nothing like each other. So we've got one on one end of the spectrum. They're an old space company. They're one of the oldest of old space companies, right? So they've got their really wide sort of horizontal integration scheme. They buy as many things as they can. They design a few things. And it's slow. and they rely on old processes that aren't optimized. And then we've got the new space company, right? One of really just a handful of new space companies that have been successful, SpaceX. And they're young and agile, and their engineers work until their eyes bleed. And there's this tremendous effort, but they're doing a lot of things for the first time, and they're insisting upon doing things that, maybe it'd be better to buy. And they're trying a lot of innovative processes, and they try to push it through quickly. So, I don't really agree with either one, but, that was when I first started. So then, over the past 2 years, I've seen things that, again, I was amazed that I'm going to characterize them as all positive. So, neither of the providers really have it right, and they're in different directions. But NASA doesn't either. So they have all those traditional, their impetus has always been to own everything they can, at least from the space launch perspective. So if you think back to, shuttle, or even like some of the ELVs that are flying or about to fly, they really try to use the STS programs and LSP to jump on top of things and control it really directly. And CCP isn't as much like that. So we didn't follow the original plan, which is, hey, we're going to buy these rockets and capsules, and we'll just check a box and we'll be ready to fly. So we are giving a lot more technical oversight, but it's nothing like the level that was expected. So we really let the providers, bring their own strengths in, and we're learning from them. And so let me. I hacked together a couple talking points, like on my way over in the Seattle traffic. So, how is NASA evolving, right? And I'm talking about like within the last 2 to 3 years. I've seen this. They're not doing the micromanaging, right? So they know that they're more so turning into a certification and oversight agency. We're still a technical authority, and we still do a ton of oversight, and we work together, and we accept or reject, and we give feedback, and we try to help people fine-tune their designs. But there isn't an incredible amount of control. It's just an appropriate amount, and we haven't swung all the way to the other side. So we're definitely not just a buyer. Everybody's working in integrated teams. So, we work with the providers all the time. I've got counterparts at both. We share ideas. Actually, if you go down to the Cocoa Beach Hilton, sometimes they're sharing ideas with each other. It's very strange. It's because everybody's attitude is starting to change as they see things come together. They really hope that, the rising tide is going to lift all boats. So, they're not giving away company secrets or whatever, but in good faith, they're sometimes sharing information. I thought that was crazy, especially, given how different SpaceX and Boeing are. There's a lot less bloat at NASA. They've been cutting red tape like crazy. All the process optimization that we've learned from the commercial providers, we're starting to integrate that. So, it used to be that there was a serious technical chain of command that you'd have to follow to get a problem resolved. And now we're allowed to shortcut. So now we're allowed to go to the relevant technical authority and really get things done in days versus weeks or even months when you're just sitting and waiting for responses. What really blew me away is that NASA, at least in this program, the centers are starting to cooperate with each other. So I don't know if you guys have heard this, but within NASA centers, KSC versus JSC versus Marshall and like Armstrong and Glenn and JPL, they all like to carve out their own little section and sort of defend it, sometimes violently. So, they really don't want anybody to help them with their stuff, and they don't really particularly want to help you with yours. But, the program office is at KSC, so there's no issues there. We integrate technical with program pretty easily there. But, I had heard things about SLS where people at Marshall, for instance, working on propulsion or working on tankage, really want that to be their science project. But I haven't seen that anymore. So I'm hoping that this program is kind of like, the first indicator of how it really should be. And, you know, I don't know if how many ex-NASA people are here, but probably the center's cooperating thing for once it will blow you away more than SpaceX and Boeing helping each other on the back channels. Some of that bloat reduction is probably turnover in our favor too. So a lot of guys and girls that were retired in place, sort of, you know, collecting the paycheck and moving papers across their desk that, you know, these are the things we call fat or bloat or whatever. That started to resolve. We're putting like new wine in an old bottle. The old bottle has this great NASA meatball logo on it that everybody like loves and respects. You see it on like T-shirts in Target and pop culture. So, you know, we're still NASA, but inside we're starting to modernize. So you've got people that are really great at what they do, new technical disciplines, newest tools. I see a lot of my students starting to come up there versus the folks that were there when I was first hired, which of course were, you know, early shuttle program veterans and previous. And it's just amazing, like, you know, they are actually giving some of the younger people, you know, we're talking like early 30s younger people, a little bit of room to breathe. And like they're designing some of the hierarchies and processes that are gonna run things. And they have a big career in front of them, so they're not interested in disengaging. And I think that's really helped also. There's gonna be huge lessons learned, at least with commercial crew, I think. The fact that people have come around and they've realized that things are gonna work better when they're open to those lessons and learning from you know, other centers or even their providers. There really should be a lot of emphasis placed on that, because I think that things can be further streamlined. And I mean, it's kind of like this is the right time to do it finally. Like after so much grinding and so many you know, sort of programs that weren't really able to get out of the gate. I'm really like tremendously pleased with this kind of stuff. So let's see, what did I see between the providers and NASA? Because believe it or not, instead of us just giving them a pass-fail grade, they're also incorporating, you know, a lot of our suggestions. Like I'm pretty happy to say that, you know, there's designs on both spacecraft and launch vehicles that myself and my team has had significant influence on. So, you know, you feel like you're really making a contribution across a large spectrum. And instead of them wanting to, you know, protect their IP as closely as possible, they're really open to a lot of these things, and they're learning from us, and we're learning from them. And it's weird because as NASA kind of figures out where the middle is, we've got the new space company, and they're admitting that maybe it's not great to rush so fast, and maybe we should take more data when we come up with a new manufacturing process and try to qualify it. And then the old space company is like, well, you know, do we really need this in triplicate at 18 levels with nobody going through the inbox for months? All right, well, so we're moving back closer to the middle. And incidentally, you know, with that perspective, you know, we sort of kind of evaluate other companies too, and we see that a lot of them already understand how to operate in the middle and are optimizing themselves as such. So, you know, there's like I feel like there's another company in town here that's not Boeing that like has similar team colors or something. And you know, our opinion is they probably found something pretty close to the happy medium. So we're glad we're seeing that. And then we know that our interactions are going to be with companies that are doing things like that in the future that, you know, want to have a dialogue. Like, we still want to be the certification agency. We still want to double check all your work. But the more you work in integrated teams, the more you trust each other and learn from each other, the better it's getting. And I mean, honestly, like I said, there's some people that meet up after work from different companies and from the government and have a couple beers and share ideas. And of course, I'm not here from NASA advocating that, but I mean, I think it's great. And it means that they recognize that they can learn from each other, and it's not even happening fast enough for them. So they're going out and they're sort of, you know, taking the reins on that sort of thing. I mean, it's not perfect, you know, but I feel like we're finally evolving into a situation where everybody's a little bit more open. Everybody's still got their best interests, their investors or stock prices in mind. But at least from the technical and part of the program perspective, like these guys they're starting to get it. They know that when you meet in the middle, you want to be fast, you want to be capable, you want to be agile, but you want to do it with maturity. So we got one company with all the maturity that's got to learn to move quick, and then we've got the other one that is a bit cavalier that needs to learn to act like an adult sometimes. And it's getting there, and I feel like my main worry is that this is like a wave that'll pass, right? So while the iron is hot, I just want everybody to strike. So I think that this is the appropriate time for some of the people who work in those companies, people who work in other companies, entrepreneurs, people with great ideas. Just make sure you manage the way you do things properly, and be, sort of open, but also authoritative about the things that you know are right, and balance your processes. And I think that, we might actually be able to do it this time. I feel like it's SSI 50, right? So I'm not 50, but I feel like we've been dead in the water on a couple of things for 50 years. So finally evolved. I think it's time to do it. And, I've got a lot of specific things that I've observed that I'm not going to blurt out in the middle of this room, but if you got like specific questions, I'll be floating around today and talk about some of those really, really good positive points that I've been seeing lately. So that's just what I wanted to share with you guys today. All right, so next, Henry, if you want to come up here and get set. All right. Yeah, does anybody have a couple of questions that won't get me in trouble? Yes, sir.
The answers to get you in trouble.
It's really a comment. Right now, at this moment, is the golden age of rocketry. There are more rockets being developed, better rockets being developed all over the world at a fantastic rate. And appreciate it. Okay, we went through a long period where it wasn't like that. It's great now. It's not even good. It's great. And I think you are seeing some of that directly in your work life.
Yeah, I can't jump up and down with a commercial crew logo on or a meatball and make too much noise about that, but it's absolutely true. It's finally coming together on a lot of different levels, and the formula is just about right, and a lot of people are getting it right.
So first of all, thank you for being the remote sensing suite inside the planet, because to a lot of us, and by that I mean taxpayers, NASA seems a little bit like, like the planet Venus, right? Shrouded in cloud, you go through a sulfuric acid bath to get to the surface, it burns you up when you're inside, and you only get 20 minutes of information. So
20 whole minutes?
yeah, something like that. So what I want to ask you is, at some of those beer bowl sessions that you alluded to, is there an unspoken play manual for how the culture deals with the whipsaw, conflicting thruster inputs of political change? On that.
Taxpayer dollars burning. Well, a lot of these people that get together, they're not huge decision makers. We're talking technical or middle management and below, the people that are sort of in the trenches, right? And they don't see as much of that, but they know that, things are going to change. We're going to start getting our money from different people at different times. But in general, they're all completely dedicated to progress. And these aren't people that are doing engineering because they think it's got a great value prospect for, career earnings. These are people that are like us, that are pumped about space. And they're finally getting in there and they're digging in. And enough of them have a voice that it's even influencing people higher up. So is there a plan? No, but what do millennials do anyway? They just go with the flow. So, and they're good at it. So, you don't have to get hit by the wave, you can surf it.
Right. As a quick follow-up, so do you sense that there are ever folks who want to protect their programs and see the change coming and know how to hunker down and ride it out?
You know, I
Is that
can't,
a bad thing or a good thing?
I can't speak to all the programs, but, you know, the couple I've seen, they're doing some really interesting things. Like, for the first time ever, I see that they're doing acceptable, acceptable risk calculations that are less insanely averse, right? So I think that their plan is not to hunker down for like the wave to hit them or whatever. It's kind of just like to open the gates a little bit more so it flows more readily. So no, I don't think anybody's building a bunker and getting ready for the next space economic downturn. I feel like they know it's already off the pad and it's not coming back.
Cool. Thank you so much.
You've talked some about this, but could you expand a bit on maybe the factors that are causing this to happen now? What's the evolution coming from?
Probably two things. Technical maturity, right? So we've got incredible technical growth that's making things faster and cheaper. Metal additive manufacturing is amazing. And the fact that those are coming out with material properties that are better than wrought parts and can be done faster, geometries that we've never seen before, you know, allowing different types of structures and propulsion systems. So we've got sort of like the exotic tech aspect, right? And of course CAD, right? So everything's done in CAD, controlled by SE&I, and you can design things overnight and then have them on the floor the next day. So I think that the technical and design processes have been optimized, so they're leveraging that. And then I think that really there's a different mindset. Like, I'm a huge fan of internet memes, all right? And I noticed that a lot of them are based on, you know, sort of this angst with previous generation, leaving them with a bad job market or a crappy real estate market. Well, there's a wave of people that are coming in that are PO'd that we haven't been back to the moon, that we haven't done something bigger than the ISS, that we haven't started planetary resource extraction, and they're not entirely sure how to do it in the big picture, but like I said, they're jumping right in the trenches and they're ready to fight. So I think that the mindset change with sort of a new wave of people coming in, and then the fact that the capabilities are much greater than they've ever been.
Thank you.
Hi, returning to your broader topic, which was a view from KSC. Not all, but a bunch of your conversation was about commercial crew, where there's a particular kind of pretty, from a SpaceX point of view, it's the most involved that NASA gets with SpaceX. And with Falcon 9, there was certainly some of that as well. With Falcon Heavy, with the Starship Super Heavy, and with New Glenn, I think these companies are all pretty much just privately developing their own stuff. And where they may need to get launch licenses, they don't need to really have. Ultimately, NASA will or will not decide to fly people on those or cargoes on those, et cetera, et cetera. My question is, in the back channel conversation, what do you get from both your NASA colleagues and in the, let's call it the hotel people you talked about, who are working on those systems, which are not your commercial crew systems, with much less NASA? How are you seeing that change? Because it seems like that's important.
Well, in those companies, they build their architectures so that they're easy to swap between vehicles and spacecraft. So there's a considerable amount of Dragon that swaps parts with a Falcon, even though it's a launch vehicle spacecraft. It's very weird, but they build the architectures like that. So they get a lot of cross-pollination from the people that are working within CCP, and I think they appreciate it. So NASA always wants to at least be the rubber stamp at the end, but to get that rubber stamp, there's always going to be some technical oversight. So I think that's how those future programs and interactions might go. And I think the providers and companies like that will be receptive to it because it's been to their benefit so far.
Maybe let me ask the question differently, though. But what about a rocket like Starship Super Heavy, that where Musk may decide to privately put people on it, There isn't any discussion at all of NASA flying astronauts on it right now. It's simply a private company building a vehicle, and yeah, they'll have to get an FAA license.
True, yeah, we just don't want them to make a mess in the Merritt Island Wildlife Refuge. So, I mean, during safety and environmental reviews and stuff like that come with just their operation, we still get to take a look. So it's not like they're doing things completely without oversight, but I mean, if they want to go to their Texas site and do whatever they like, it's true, they can do that.
But do you get any talk, I'm going to sit down, but do you get any more sense of that kind of vibe in the community there? That was kind of my question.
Not really. I don't think that they're thinking that far ahead. They're kind of on the grind. But what I will say is that the commercial crew program, which I admitted is not going the way it was originally intended, which is fine. We needed an intermediate step. I think that those future ventures will probably look something like what CCP was intended to be. So when we get to that comfort level, then we can reduce the amount of time that we spend directly integrated with them, and they can feel okay with our cross-checks. So I think that we're getting to a point where that comfort level will allow us to do stuff like that, but there's no immediate talks about it, really.
Yeah, in reading the human landing system procurement documents, I note a pretty wide divergence between what's in that document set and the requirements in that set and the policy of the White House and the National Space Council regarding lunar surface activities. Can you go into that a little bit?
Well, at KSC, we're not heavy on the gateway stuff yet, or the lander stuff. So I'm probably not the person to ask, but I think what you might be alluding to is there's a bit closer link between the folks that design our programs and the political side than there's ever been.
It's my question's kind of in the opposite sense of that. There's a divergence between the two.
I honestly don't see that. What I see is that they want to, and of course I haven't read the docs and contracts specifically, but they want to offer an air of accommodation, even if they do write contracts and requirements to be tighter. One more?
Very brief. It's kind of a follow-up to the earlier question. I think what you're describing sounds a lot like what's sometimes called the 4-minute mile effect. And I wanted to ask if that's maybe what this is. Before Roger Bannister ran the first 4-minute mile, everybody said a human can't run 4-minute mile. But right after he did, within the next year, a couple of more people did, and 10 years later, high school kids were doing it. So the recognition that this is possible, that it's been achieved when it can be achieved, changes how people think about it. Is that kind of what you're observing?
What I see is that things that people didn't think were possible to certify now have flight heritage. And everybody gets comfortable and they say, oh crap, that actually did work. We can do it like that. Like, you don't have to be scared of cutting corners if you're really just rounding them off. So I think that I don't know if there was always like the mental block of the 4-minute mile or whatever, but we've certainly reached milestones that we didn't think we were going to reach before, and now they're the new norm, right? So, sort of, yeah. All right, guys. Thanks for hearing me. Don't get me fired.